You're trying to convince people they must have these electric vehicles. Effectively, you've got to have this product which is no better than what you've already got. In fact, in most cases, it's actually worse than what you've got. Hi there, welcome back to the Car UK channel. Today, I'm going to talk to you about car prices, used car prices, and my concern that I believe that used car prices over the next probably few years are going to rise quite heavily. It's something that's been worrying me now for a while, and to be honest with you, when you speak to a lot of people in the trade, they also seem to think that there is a strong possibility that prices are going to rise. And I actually saw an article yesterday which actually spurred me to do this video because this consensus seems to be growing. Now, the reason behind that is purely down to the fact of the up-and-coming ban on ICE vehicles or combustion engine vehicles, petrol and diesel engine vehicles, which was in 2030, it put up to 2035, and now, from what everything the new government is saying, it's going to bring it back down to 2030 again, which effectively means that no manufacturer can produce a diesel or petrol engine after 2030. Now, bear in mind, we're at the end of 2024 pretty much now anyway. That only gives us a few years to go, which means the market's got to be taken up by some other form of propulsion. And in reality, the only other thing out there is electric. Hydrogen is on the scene as well, but unfortunately it's in its infancy. So it only leaves electric out there that fits the bill to meet this new agenda. And actually seeing this article, which I found in motortrader.com, credits here for the journalist who did this piece, I cannot agree more. So let me just quickly read you this article and I'll give you my theory also why I believe this is absolutely spot on. So the article reads that ICE cars will be harder to buy because of the ZEV mandate. So that is a zero emissions vehicle mandate, basically the 2030 ban, that's a better way of calling it. It says that more than 8 out of 10 people, 84%, think that used ICE, combustion engine cars, will become harder to buy because of the 2030 production ban. According to Startline's October used car tracker, which surveyed 300 consumers and 62 used car dealers, 73% expected that ICE combustion engine vehicles to become more expensive, and 66% say they'll hang on to their existing combustion vehicle. That is not good. It goes on to say, Paul Burgess, CEO of Starline Motor Finance, said the petrol and diesel car production deadline has been something of a political football. Boris Johnson introduced it in 2030, Rishi then moved it back to 2035, and Keir Starmer has brought it back, or bringing it back to 2030 again, as we mentioned before. The motorists that we have surveyed this month are probably right in their assumptions. The supply of petrol and diesel cars into the used market is going to start falling quite quickly, and this could lead to a situation where demand drives up prices. And I have to agree with that, and the reason being is that we've got a deadline coming up in 2030, which you might think, well, that's 5 years from now. Well, obviously things will progress by then, everything will get sorted out, loads of people will be taking on electric vehicles. But the numbers don't really suggest we're going to make that deadline. Now, let me give you some numbers on this to back this up. In 2020, just before COVID, electric car sales were about 6.5% roughly on per month sales of new registered electric vehicles. Now, that's actually gone up quite a lot. It's actually about 17.5% now, going for used figures from July this year. So that's 11% roughly increase in 4 years. But it's still only 17% of new vehicles being registered are fully electric. The majority of vehicles, around 80% of them, are still combustion engine vehicles. And we've only got that far in 4 years with tens of millions of pounds of investments from the industry itself trying to advertise electric vehicles to everyone, because obviously they are having their hands tied. So for me, it's a tall ask to try and then get another 80% of those combustion engines switched over to electric or some other alternative in the next effectively 5 years. But in reality, it's less than that, because most manufacturers who produce combustion vehicles are not going to be switching over on New Year's Eve in 2029 when this legislation comes into force. They're going to be doing that far sooner. In fact, most manufacturers have already committed to stop producing combustion engines, some of them in the next 18 months to 2 years. So really, it's actually shorter than 2030. The reality is the manufacturers are going to need to get people switched over in the next 2 to 3 years to get anywhere near where they need to be. Now, I just do not see that happening. So why are people not buying electric vehicles, and why is this going to push up used cars prices in my view? Well, let's address why they're not buying electric vehicles first. That one to me is really, really simple. Electric cars do have a place. There's no doubt about it. I'm not slating electric cars, but they're not the answer for everyone. That's the problem. But because it's the only solution to the problem, i.e. it's the only vehicle, power plant that can offer zero emissions currently. Oh, there is hydrogen, but it's 10 years behind in my view. We're only starting to see hydrogen come about. and the deadline is in a few years, so we've only got electric cars that can answer that problem. But because we're so obsessed, or the government's obsessed with zero tailpipe emissions, regardless of how much carbon and how much pollution's causing the creation of all these electric vehicles, that's irrelevant. As long as it's zero emissions at the tailpipe, that's all they care about. So because it's the only answer, that's what they are pushing. But there's problems with electric vehicles, and it's down to price and range. They're the two main ones. Batteries were a problem with lifespan, but that seems to be getting better. But price and range is a problem, and they will get better over time, probably, yes. But we're up against a deadline, and you've got a market to convince. So the fundamental flaw to me is a marketing issue. You're trying to convince people they must have these electric vehicles. Effectively, you've got to have this product which is no better than what you've already got. In fact, in most cases, it's actually worse than what you've got, because you've got to pay more for it, and you're not going to have the range. You can go and buy a new Dacia Spring that's just come out. That's a fantastic little electric car that's now, sub 20 grand. I think they're about 17, 18 grand now. But it's still dearer than its combustion equivalent. And it doesn't have the range. It only does about 130, 40 miles. And a car company says it does 150 mile range. In reality, it's more likely going to be 120 miles. And obviously over time that will decrease ever so slightly as well. And people don't want to be restricted by range. Yes, you'll be told by, marketing companies, you'll be told by all these think tanks and the government and obviously the manufacturers that, most people only do 8 miles an average journey, which is correct. So why do you need 100 and odd mile range? It's perfectly acceptable for a day-to-day average person. But that's an average daily life, and sometimes we want to go a bit further and we don't want it to be worse off than what we currently are. Why do we have to accept the fact that we can only do 120 miles, 130 miles, and I'm going to have to stop somewhere, charge up for 30 minutes to get 70% range to carry on a journey and have to do that again? People don't see the reason why they should have to go backwards to do that and have to pay more money to do that as well, when they can just buy a petrol or diesel alternative. That is the fundamental problem. And then you could answer that by saying, well, just get a car that's got electric car that's got more range. Great, I'll go and get a car that's got 300 mile range. There's plenty of those around, but they're about 40, 50 or 60,000 pounds when you can buy its equivalent version with a petrol or diesel engine in for probably 40% cheaper. You've either got to pay fortunes or settle for less range. So people just generally don't want to do that. So trying to get the market from 17% now on average monthly sales of electric cars up to 80, 90%, which is where you need to be roughly around 2029 to stand any chance really of the market not imploding, I just can't see it. I cannot see, even when people are trying to be pushed over the edge, that they're going to accept it. They're going to hold on to what they've got. People are going to sit around on their combustion cars going, do you know what? I ain't jumping first. I ain't going to be the one who's going to buy these electric vehicles. Some of the people will be fine. They'll be happy with them. Brilliant. There's lots of happy customers out there, and they have a place, electric cars. But for most people, they're not suitable. Clean used cars with combustion engines in my view, are just going to go through the roof as people hold on to them. They're literally going to run into the die because no one's going to want to jump off the fence first. It's going to be a slow and very painful process, I think, trying to transition to an alternative fuel source. And trying to push it with a very short deadline is just a disaster waiting to happen. The government is going to take us, in my view, off a cliff edge, and manufacturers in particular, off a cliff edge in 2030 if it does not U-turn on this ridiculous idea that we must do it before 2030. I don't see why we should. It's just a silly thing to do. The industry, it will always say it's trying to do its best and it's ready and it can do it, but the numbers don't back that up. So I worry over the next 18 months, 2 years, we are going to start to see prices of all combustion engine vehicles start to slowly go up. And we've seen how prices can rise with demand of the market shifting ever so slightly. We saw it with COVID. Demand obviously went through the roof and prices went through the roof. In my view, the government needs to change tack. It should carry on with the 2035 deadline. I think that's a more realistic target. Yes, we should be pushing the technologies. Yes, we should be trying to get emission standards down. You could still reduce the emission standards. They could do that. They could go back to manufacturers and give them a bit more time and help them with that journey. That could be done. I just don't see why we should be pushed towards a cliff edge for effectively trying to get zero emissions across the country by 2050, to sit there on January the 1st, 2050 going, brilliant, the UK is now net zero, whilst two of the biggest players, China and America, will probably still be producing 30-40% of all global emissions, even by 2050. But at least we'll have a moral standpoint. We'll cut our own feet off in the process and damage our economy and damage people's lives by telling them they must have these vehicles and spend fortunes on them and tell people they can't drive these combustion engines anymore and effectively run them off the road. But it'll all be worth it in the end, apparently. And if you believe that, well, that's up to you, but it's not something that I agree with. I think, yes, we need to do something. We need to be all working together to try and bring down global emissions, but you don't cut your own feet off in the process to do it. Anyway, that is my rant over. Let me know your thoughts on this. Do you think that people are going to be holding on to combustion engine vehicles over the next few years? They're going to resist that change to electric. Are you going to resist? Are you waiting for something else to come along? Are you waiting to see if the government changes tack? Are you waiting to see if hydrogen comes along and is the answer to your problem? Or something else that comes along, maybe something different like synthetic fuels or something like that that might fill the gap? Who knows? Let me know your thoughts and comments. I'd really like to hear people's opinions on this. Just to finally say, this is not a bash at electric vehicles. I don't want people coming on going, oh, you just hate electric cars, blah, blah, blah. I don't mind them. I actually enjoy some electric cars. I've driven quite a few. I actually think some of them are really, really decent. I just don't like the fact that they're being forced down our throats and told these are the answers, when the reality is they're not the answer. They're the answer to for some people are the answer, but not for everyone. I just thought I'd mention that before I get slated in the comments suggesting that I'm anti-electric, because I'm not. Anyway, let me know your thoughts, guys. If you're new to the channel, please like and subscribe. Hit that like and subscribe button. It helps me out immensely, and you get to see all my latest content as it lands. Not just videos like this, but also my goings on in the motor trade, running my little used car pitch in Crewe in Cheshire, where I deal in cars under £5,000. I hope you might find that interesting as well, so make sure you check out my other videos, and also my trips to the used car auctions where I buy cars pretty much every week. So make sure you check out those videos as well. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.